Welcome to the Clemson Dubcast. It is Tuesday, November 26th on a busy Thanksgiving week. Bunch of NIL revenue sharing related stuff at Tiger Illustrated breaking today, and we have been at the forefront of it so far and will continue to be. And, oh, by the way, a bit of a big game coming up this weekend. Clemson, South Carolina. Playoff implications, rivalry implications, of course, all of the above. Plenty of intrigue, and we're going to cover it all for you at TigerIllustrated.com moving through the week. My good friends Blake Smith and Brooke Archenhold have been part of the podcast since the beginning, way back in August of 2018. They have an accomplished team of personal injury attorneys at Parham, Smith, and Archenhold based in Greenville. They are Clemson people, and their skillful attorneys have decades of experience in complicated litigation matters, taking a special interest in medical malpractice, nursing home abuse, and neglect, car accident cases that have left the individuals involved in serious trouble. For a free consultation at Parham, Smith, and Archenhold, call 864-990-4581 or online at parhamlaw.com. That's Parham law.com. Solero Communications, formerly known as Tandem Payment, is a full-service integrated electronic payments provider powered by leading-edge technology. Solero provides a wide array of merchant solutions, simplified payments. They make onboarding, taking payments, maintaining risk management and compliance, and getting support quick and easy. At Solero, they're all about helping you achieve sustainable growth as a business. Taking payments isn't the only thing your business needs. With Solero's solutions, you can manage inventory, sell products and services via social media, schedule staff, track sales, get reports, and much, much more. Find out more about Solero at solerocommerce.com. That's CELERO commerce.com. When you're ready for a complete renovation in your home or business, open the door to more with Harris Home and Harris Commercial. Their local experienced team will totally transform any room space, from beautiful floor coverings to construction to finished details. Harris handles every step of your renovation process, whether it's a kitchen or living room or an industrial or educational setting, like some of the positively stunning work they've done at Clemson University. Go to discoverharris.com and experience a total renovation transformation from Harris Home and Harris Commercial. Okay, Scott Hamilton, the Charleston Post and Courier sports columnist, has a media life story, I think, unlike any other. He's been through it all, calls himself a cockroach. He's a survivor. I know that. Great conversation here. Enjoy. Okay, joined by Scott Hamilton, the sports columnist at the Charleston Post and Courier, and I've just learned you live on Edisto Island, and I'm seething with jealousy at the moment.
It's really cool. It's kind of like living on the far side of the moon, but it's also like living on Fantasy Island. And you know, and I mentioned to you that it's only 39 minutes farther from here to Daytona, where, you know, Clemson played, than it is to Little John Coliseum. That puts it into perspective where Edisto is on the map.
That's just insane. So how long have you lived out there?
Oh, I've been here a few years. You know, the last time you graciously invited me on your podcast, I was doing my radio show down here on ESPN Charleston, and I'd set up shop on Edisto then, and I've stuck around. I like it. I've been coming here for a long time, you know, visiting and vacationing, and finally just decided to say, let's do it. You know, there's nothing to keep me from not living here. I mean, I was in Charlotte and Lake Norman area for a long, long time, and I loved it, but there's something about this place. Because, you know, Larry, it's like, you know, we're about the same age. You know, the beaches growing up were very different than they are now. And it's got that kind of vibe where it's still untouched. It's really cool. It's really cool. But anybody out there wanting to come, we're full. So just go to Myrtle, go to Folly, go somewhere else.
Yeah, it kind of has that same feel, I think, that, you know, Sullivan's Island did when I lived in Mount Pleasant back in the early to mid 1990s, I think. I mean, it seems that way.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good comparison. Sullivan's Island, you could probably, Sullivan's is actually an ideal comparison to that. And speaking of Mount Pleasant, I pray daily for the people who live there. And the people, I mean, it's going to be Mount Pleasant / Georgetown in about 10 years. I mean, it is getting congested.
Well, here's the thing. I go back to Mount Pleasant fairly regularly, have good friends who live there, and that's where we stay when we go down there. I'll say this. There are sort of two sort of opposite sides of Mount Pleasant, if that makes any sense, at least to me. If you are on 17 and up 17, as you just alluded, all up that corridor, then that sounds like it'd be a nightmare just with traffic and all that. But if you live right off of Coleman, over there near Patriots Point, where if you work downtown, I mean, that is just easy. And Coleman, even though it's grown up for sure compared to what it was, still feels manageable to me when I'm there. And now folks who live there might argue vehemently against that. But I'm just saying, I would still, Mount Pleasant, the Coleman side still has preserved, to me, again, just my opinion, we can all disagree, what Mount Pleasant is, from what I remember, I guess, if that makes sense.
It's definitely changed, but I think that's the nature of living here. I mean, Larry, up north of Charleston, you've got Mount Pleasant, and we're talking about that. But you go south, it's happening in Hollywood. It's happening in Ravenel, the Stono Ferry golf course area. I mean, people can't obviously go east because of the ocean. And Somerville and all that to the west is getting congested. So the other option is to go south. I mean, and that comes with people just wanting to live here. I mean, because, the low country has so much to offer. You've been around. I've been down here. I lived on Hilton Head all those years before I came here. And the weather's wonderful. The people are great. The food is amazing. And you can still get real estate at a decent price compared to places up north. Now, is all that going to change? I'm sure everything's going to change eventually. But right now, this is a hot spot. And we're just going to have to brace for it, Larry. It's not 1974 again, when little kids going to Myrtle Beach and we'd have to walk up and down the Grand Strand. Hey, this is great. We got plenty of breathing room.
It's tough to have proper historical context, I guess, if that makes sense. So when I got to Mount Pleasant in, I guess, 90, 91, I'm sure there were people then who were saying, it's not the same as it was in 1978. What are all these? So, I mean, people were probably mad at me, and my family for coming in, whereas now I look at Mount Pleasant, I'm like, it's not the same as it was in 97 or 98. And so it's like, I mean, yes, I see what you're saying, because there is I don't know the numbers, but the great northern influx has to be infinitely higher currently than it was in the 90s, I would imagine.
You hit on something there, because I've seen it. I've seen people. I'm one of those people that says that now that I live here. Oh, this is changing so much. And I had people who I guess were sideways with me, but maybe it wasn't quite as extreme because I had that gradual shift. I was down here so much. I knew people, and it wasn't like somebody that picked up lock, stock, and barrel from upstate New York or Cleveland area or somewhere like there and came and planted their flag here on Edisto. I was more of a gradual burn for these people. So I didn't experience it as much, but I hear it. I hear people say that. And again, I'm guilty of it. I'll see an out-of-state license plate at the Food Lion, which again, we only have one grocery store, Food Lion, by the way. And I'll see that license plate and I'll go, oh God, here they come. Here they come. I can't wait for winter. So I'm a hypocrite, but I get to live here. So it's okay.
All right, let's get to the important part. Congratulations, belated congratulations on the prestigious sports columnist job at the Post and Courier. Gene Sapikoff retired. I guess it was, I don't know exactly when that was. I forgot. Of course, the late great Ken Berger preceded him. So you got quite the legacy to uphold there, and I just happy for you, first of all, and would like to just talk more about how that came about, and also your background as a media survivor, I guess, is the best, maybe the best way to put that I can put it.
Media cockroach. That's right. I never thought I would hear my name either coming after or preceding sports columnist at the Post and Courier. And Larry, you know my story, and for your listeners, I'll give them the quick elevator version. I've been in media for 26 years now, and I never dreamed that I would have this job, even though it was the job I wanted pretty much from day one after I met the late, great Ken Berger. But it's just not something you expect to ever get. And then, I went on, I did other things, Sports Business Journal, Golf Week, columnist in Winston-Salem, which was amazing, and followed a Hall of Famer there in Lennox Rawlings. And it was always pie in the sky to have this job, though. I mean, this was the end game for me. And, Lord willing, it'll be my last job now, but I've said that before in this landscape. So I'm not really counting on that anymore, but I'm incredibly humbled. And I mean that. I mean, I'm not being just facetious here because, I'm on a podcast or anything. I mean, I'll tell anybody down the street or at a bar or Walmart or wherever. I mean, this means so much to me. And kind of going back to what you said about being a media survivor, it especially means a lot, considering how my journey has unfolded, being let go at a couple of places because of cutbacks and as the industry shifts and changes every day, but also seeing how so many of my colleagues who I always felt were just immensely more talented than myself struggle to get good jobs and have to change and pivot careers as middle-aged guys. We're not spring chickens anymore, and these guys are having to reinvent themselves, something I've done over and over, and I understand what they're dealing with, but I hate it for them because I know it's heartbreaking. And I've been fortunate enough to keep treading in this industry, sometimes at my own detriment. I don't know. It's just it's hard for me to put into words, Larry, what this really means to me and how grateful I am. I mean, I'm so grateful.
And when you say the industry, and you mentioned mostly writing jobs a few minutes ago, it hasn't been just writing jobs for you, and that's really been the extraordinary difference with you is that you did, and you have to refresh my memory here. I know we talked about it a couple of years ago on the podcast, but you've done TV, you've done more recently, I guess, radio in Charleston. Can you maybe refresh and enlighten the listeners on that part of it?
Yeah. I was like everybody else, a basketball beat writer, reporter, did that, and then went to Sports Business Journal, then went to Golf Week, and I lost that job long time ago. We were cutbacks, and I had to reinvent myself and kind of bounced around. And I actually got out of the business, Larry, for about 2 years. And I ended up working for a minor league baseball team, a South Atlantic League team, actually, the one in Lexington, Kentucky. A friend of mine owned it. And he called and he said, come work for me. And I'm like, what am I going to do? Be pitching coach or something? He goes, no. He says, work in the front office, sell advertising. So I think about it. And I took him up on it. And Larry, I realized something. And I'll get to this point later to go back to your original point. I realized that sales and journalism have two things in common. You have to have two traits. You have to be able to communicate, obviously, but you have to be able to build and develop relationships, because sales are like news stories. They don't fall in your lap. And being a journalist and somebody who had some success at marrying those two traits together to create a product, I had 49% of all new business that year for the team. 12-person sales staff. I never sold anything. But my brain was trained for media, and I was able to get the columnist job in Winston-Salem. And a couple of years into that, we also had a 3-hour radio show, talk show I did every day on 14 stations up there. And so I was learning another aspect of that. And then another wave of cutbacks, and I lost both of those. And I said, well, Lord, what am I going to do? And I said, people still watch TV. So I called a friend of ours, Tim Guidera. He was the columnist in Savannah, and Tim had pivoted to television around 2010. And I called him and I said, "What's it like?" And he goes, "Oh, it's great for guys like us. It's so easy. Your skills translate. The technical stuff they'll teach you." So he helped me arrange some interviews, and I ended up getting a TV job. I ended up becoming an evening news anchor in Bluefield, West Virginia. My home state, West Virginia. And I anchored the news at I co-anchored at 6 and 11 and solo on the CW at 10. So, I was able to put that in my portfolio to do television and to be comfortable in front of a camera.
This is news anchor or sports anchor?
Yeah, news.
The main news. Yeah.
I was hi, good evening, and thanks for joining us. I had a makeup consultant. I had a wardrobe budget. Larry, I can do my makeup, man. I'm telling you right now, it's crazy. But it added skills to my tool set that I didn't have. And you mentioned, I'm like, I was living in North Carolina, working in West Virginia. It's not as far as you think. I had a little apartment there, and then COVID hit and all that. And I'm like, you know what? I want to go back to the low country. I want to go back. I'm not happy here. And I was able to arrange and get the radio show in Charleston. And we did that for about 2.5 years. Unfortunately, sponsors weren't panning out quite like we had hoped. It's a tough environment. Mm-hmm. But I put all these skills together. And I think that's led me to be able to get this wonderful dream job I have now. Because, Larry, you know as well as anybody, I mean, you're doing a podcast. You're doing a podcast, Larry. It's an important part of your overall product. You had to do this to develop as a journalist, but also as a businessman. And that's kind of what I went through. I learned all these different skills and traits to go from being an ink-stained reporter to being a multimedia journalist. And I tell people all the time, I'm a triple threat journalist. I can write, I can do radio, or I can do television. And I think we all have to think that way now in 2024. And what's next? I don't know, Larry. Mental telepathy. I don't know what'll be next for communicating with people, but there's something else coming. We just better be ready for it.
You're an RPO journalist.
That's right. I'm RPO. I can't even think of now. I've only had 2 cups of coffee.
Wishbone journalist.
Well, no, I like the RPO. I'm thinking not the Justin Fields, but I hate it. I'm totally blanking right now.
Well, the Wishbone was a double threat because they never threw the ball. So the RPO would be the quarterback can run it, he can give it, or he can throw it. So that'd probably be pretty fitting.
I'm the Kyler Murray of journalists.
Well, so all right, you said you learned you gained some valuable tools with the news anchor thing. What were they specifically?
Just first of all, I think it actually helped my writing because you write differently for television than you do. I remember my first TV script. I had to sit down and write it, and God bless the people at WECT in Wilmington, North Carolina. The news director there, he hired me. And he said, "You're different. I want to see what we can do with you." So he hires me as a producer, but the intent is to move me around to different things. They had a digital studio, and he wanted me to host this 1-hour digital show every day. But he said, for the first 2 weeks, we're going to train you as a producer. And I called it TV school, Larry. And you rewrite things, you write your scripts, you learn how to stack shows. And it was really cool, man. It was so much fun. But the first script I wrote, it needed to be around 90 seconds, and it clocked in at over 10 minutes. And he's like, "Okay, I see what you're doing here, but that's not really how it works." So I read a wonderful book called "Write Like You Talk."
Yeah.
And what you have to do now, what you have to do is try to marry that with some of the disciplines we learned in school and with AP style and so on. And I think that really helps. But I also learned, Larry, to think about things visually. How can I enhance this story with a video? How can I enhance this story with an audio segment? Things like that. And it's really cool. I'll be honest with you. And I should never say that because it should be assumed that everything I say is the truth. I feel like I'm 28 years old again because, well, you know how you get in a rut and it's the same old stuff day in and day out. And, when you were a beat writer, you knew the rhythm: advance, gamer, follow, feature, notes, advance, gamer, every day for months on end. And it gets to you. But when you first get that job, you're super excited, man. You're energized. And as the older you get, it's just so mundane. I feel like I did when I was 28. And not only because I have this new job, but because of all the new things that we do with it. I talk to some of my colleagues who are still in the industry that are our age, and they'll say, oh, I got to shoot a video. I have to shoot a video. I have to do this. I'm like, no, man, you get to do that. You get to do this. I said, this is going to make that look so much better. Pull that up online and look how cool it is that you have that video going with that now. Look how cool it is that, yeah, putting in those hyperlinks in your story might be a pain, but that's so much added value to the reader, and it just makes it look like you did even more of your homework. I said, this is great stuff. So that's how I approach it, man, and it's a sincere attitude.
You know, you said something interesting, right? Like you talk. You know, I have interns on a fairly regular basis at TigerIllustrated.com, and as you know, most of them, they want to learn how to write. And that's part of what I try to impart is make it conversational, you know. But I think the problem is, at least in my experience, when I first started, and for years after for years into the professional part of it, I couldn't write like I talked. And that comes with, I think, at least in my case, it comes with seasoning and years and years and years of experience where your fingers just become an extension of your voice, and you actually have a voice as a writer, which I think in general it takes a long time for that to be cultivated. You agree?
I agree 100%. And it's not just that, it's confidence.
Mm-hmm.
It's the confidence of, you know, once you get, it's like hitting a golf ball. The first couple of times you get up to try to hit a golf ball. I remember my dad was 54 years old, first time he played golf. And I finally talked him into it, and we went to play golf, and he's standing on the first tee. And my father, who was the bravest man I'll ever know, the hardest working man I'll ever know, Larry, he was literally shaking. he was shaking. He was so nervous about hitting that golf ball, but then he hit it. Then he hit another. And now, years and years and years later, I mean, hitting a golf ball for him is just like breathing. He's so comfortable stepping up and hitting a golf ball. And it's no different with writing. You've got to get your reps in, and you've got to feel comfortable that you're doing it right. And a big part of that is getting coaching, getting editing, learning from your mistakes, and reading with the work of others, and then blending it all in and making it your own. But you've got to be comfortable, man. You got to have confidence that what you're doing, it works. And going back to our friend Ken Berger, I mean, I sent him, this is the God's honest truth, Larry. I sent Ken everything I wrote, every single thing I wrote for about 2.5 years until he finally called me one day and told me to stop. This is Larry, this is true story. And I said, hey, man. He goes, listen. He said, you either got it or you don't. You got it. He said, I don't know what to tell you. He said, I appreciate it. I think you're doing a good job. You either got it or you don't. So you don't need to keep. And he wasn't mad or anything. I could have kept doing it. He did that legitimately because he felt that I needed to feel good about myself. And after that, I tell you what, I was 10 feet tall and bulletproof after getting that. I knew I wasn't Ken Berger, but to get his blessing and to know that I was on the right track, it meant the world to me.
Hey, golfers in the Clemson, Seneca area and upstate, I'm longtime friends with the folks who run Lighthouse Restaurant on Kiowee, and they've come up with a splendid new idea, the Lighthouse Kiowee Sip and Swing, a freestanding golf simulator and sports bar and grill. So not only do they have the great main restaurant, the lake favorite dockside cabana, now you can go get your golf game on inside Sip and Swing, which also has full bar and limited food menu, 4 golf bays, and it's all powered by the Golf Zone indoor golf simulator, 14 TVs to watch games from the deck, the bar, and the golf bays. Also, special offer just for podcast listeners, 50% off simulator bay rental for 1 hour, 1.5 hours, or 2 hours for first-time booking. If you go to lighthousekiowee.com or call 864-985-9523 and use the promo code Dubcast50. That's a great deal and a great idea from the Lighthouse at Kiowee folks. Quick word about a really cool Clemson tailgating option for those of you who don't have regular parking spots. First-class valet service by the Abernathy Hotel, just a block from the Rock. Here's the deal. You drive up to the Abernathy, you and your friends get out of your car, somebody parks it for you, you go inside to the air-conditioned VIP hospitality suite that's loaded with food and drinks. You also get access to their private lounge and bar, food trucks, clean bathrooms, live music, vendors, VIP gift bags, and even a golf cart ride to the stadium. They've seen a great response to this so far. You can sign up now for the South Carolina game. Call 864-654-5299 or go to theabernathy.com to learn more. You mentioned a minute ago about the old, the routines of a beat writer. I'm curious to explore what a routine is like for somebody who works at a newspaper today in 2024 versus, say, 2004, back when I joined the Post and Courier.
Yeah.
It just looks and feels vastly different. I guess, first of all, I can share what it was like or what it looked like then, and it was, you actually have an office that you go into. Ken Berger would go into the office every day that he wasn't traveling. You had a sports editor, you had a big old newsroom, you had all these layers of editors, and this collaborative process. I imagine it's vastly different now. It's not even the same office anymore, is it?
No.
Yeah.
No, it's like a little loft. It's one floor with these long tables that people come in and set up on, and the editors are in these little. They're on long tables too, I guess. They don't even have cubicles, and there are like 3 offices, and that's it. We have a recording studio and a conference room. I never go in there, and I went in on Friday to do some stuff, but yeah, you're right. I mean, it's so different. The biggest change, I guess, though, for like the writer who's out on the street, the beat writer, the guy who's out at practice and games and all that. I mean, the immediacy of everything. As soon as the game's over, you've got to have something filed.
Mm-hmm.
They've got to have something cooking. But other than that, I mean, it's not a whole lot different. You've got to keep the social media fed. That's big. And you guys, it's no different than what you guys are doing. Really. It's not. And maybe that's a perfect way to put it. It's become a different type of publication than it is. The rhythm is still the same. Stories during the week, advance, gamer, follow, notes, all that. And that's no different than what you guys do. It really isn't.
Yeah, I guess the one difference would be your social media would exist on the normal social media channels, Twitter, Facebook, whatever, whereas our social media, or at least the important social media to us, is our thousands of subscribers who congregate on a message board, and there's a constant conversation there where we are accountable. We are directly accountable to them, to our customers. Like if I mess something up, in an article or get a stat wrong or something, I'm going to freaking hear about it. But, directly. And that's great. I love it. I love that. I love that accountability, the sort of man-to-man or person-to-person relationships, the checks and balances, I guess you could say. Whereas before, when I worked at a newspaper, it just seems like newspaper guys, newspaper people sort of were in this ivory tower, like looking down on their critics and saying, we're going to write, you're going to read what we want you to read. And instead of it being a collaborative, it's like, hey, what can I give you today that you can't get anywhere else? That's my duty and my job. What gets me out of bed every morning is the mission to give my subscribers something that makes them, where they can't get anywhere else, first of all, and number 2, where they're like, man, that's the best $10 a month I'll ever spend. Obviously, we're not perfect on that, but that's really the general goal there. So I think that's where it might differ a bit, or maybe even substantially, with the newspaper model. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. I mean, you said community,
mm-hmm.
and I think that's because look, you guys are all bound together by one thing, by Clemson athletics, as to where I've got to bounce around and give equal amounts of love to this and equal amounts of love to that, depending what the bigger story is and this, that, and the other. And you do that to a degree underneath the umbrella of the athletic department. It's football season and they've got South Carolina this week, so we might have to pay a little bit more attention to that than the basketball team's game out in Boise or something. But everybody is underneath this one umbrella of Clemson athletics, so you can roll up your sleeves and get in on your own. And I like the way you put that, Larry. Your message boards are your own Facebook.
Right.
I think that is so cool, man. And you're one of them because you earn your living through their passion.
Right.
And I just think that's cool, man. I mean, what you guys have cultivated there and built is really neat. And by the way, I don't know if I should even say this, but I'm going to go ahead. And it goes back and forth. The last time I got a hate email, and I get them, as you know, I've been called the scoreboard right now over the last 3 months since I started this job has me in tilting in favor of being a Clemson homer. Now that way I could change it any moment. But
that's great. It's interesting. So I'll never forget when Ken Berger, it was the Music City Bowl of 2006. Clemson had fallen apart late in the season after a really hot start.
Was that Syracuse?
No, it's Kentucky.
Okay, I was at that one, I believe.
Yeah, they had lost at home to South Carolina. I think they had lost 4 of their last 6. They lose to Kentucky, not a very good Kentucky team in the Music City Bowl. And I think before the game was even over, Ken Berger, who was sitting beside me, said he turns his computer toward me, and his Nashville Dateline, and the lead paragraph was Tommy Bowden. It's time to get rid of Tommy Bowden, something to that effect. And I'm like, oh my God, just the gravity of it, the magnitude of it was just so huge. I'm like, Ken Berger is calling for him to be done. And that was a different time because back then, when a prominent sports newspaper columnist said something like that, it reverberated, throughout the state. Whereas now, however many years later, opinions are a dime a dozen. Every freaking person on Twitter, Facebook, whatever. People opine on everything. And so my question to you is as you're trying to sort of crystallize your role and your mission or whatever it is, how do you balance the watered down nature of opinions in today's conversation with the job that you see yourself doing?
Wow. You've rocked my world, because I've thought about that so often, the day, and there was an article, and I'll try to find it, Larry, and send it to you. I think it was in Esquire a while back about the power of the sports columnist back in the 20th century.
Mm-hmm.
It's changed so much now. I'm the only one in this state, first of all.
That's sad. I hate that.
That is awful.
Yes.
That is awful. There are only 2 in North Carolina. Scott Fowler at the Observer and Luke Dukak at the Raleigh News and Observer. It's sad. I have to do it, and I have to be mindful that I can't be just giving an opinion just to give an opinion. I have to have some facts. And Ken was the same. Any argument, you better come with your facts, preferably 3 pillars to build your argument. But you're right. Everybody has an opinion. Twitter, there are millions of sports columnists out there on Twitter, and whatever this new one is, Blue Sky or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It's hard, and I think it actually makes me a better reporter because I have to have those facts, but I also have to use my own life experiences and perspective to kind of put things to where maybe it's a little more relatable. I know that's kind of a winding, rambling answer, but that's about the best way I could say it, Larry. Just try to back everything up with facts, because the people out there saying fire Tommy Bowden in 2024 are doing it because they didn't like him running a draw play on 3rd and 12. They're not saying it because they haven't seen progress in the development of the offensive line or the NIL collective isn't working properly or anything like that. They're just saying it because in that moment they want to get rid of it.
Yeah, it's kind of like websites like mine. have created kind of an unfortunate circumstance. I mean, of course, I love my job. Like, I've already said, like, I think I have one of the best jobs in sports media, honestly, just because of that relationship, that direct relationship between the customer and the person working for them. But some of the drawbacks, I think, include, there's really the generalist sports columnist or the general assignment reporter. Fans just nowadays, when they're in their own silos, within their own bubble, they're just not used to some guy coming in and writing about their team, once every week, right? So like, who's this? He's not plugged in here or whatever it is. And so it just makes, again, I think it's unfortunate. I have newspapers in my blood. I'm a newspaper guy at heart. And so the reality that there's only one sports columnist in the state is just, I don't like that.
I experienced exactly what you're talking about a month ago. I had a column about South Carolina basketball. It's out there, so I might as well go ahead and talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And my headline was South Carolina men bucking their own sad history. And the point of the column, Larry, is that, they had a great year last year. They exceeded expectations greatly. Lamont Paris, what he did was amazing. Deserved every coaching award he got. But the facts of the matter are they have not gone in back-to-back years to the NCAA tournament except for a handful of times. And it's been a long time since they've done it. And people, you don't know what you're talking about. No, you don't. Well, I did my research. It's pretty obvious. They have a sad history. And they were sideways with me because the column before that was talking about, it was from ACC Tip-Off in Charlotte, how the perception and the expectations for Clemson basketball have changed coming off an Elite Eight.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you're a guy who's on the inside, but you're also a former journalist. I tell you those two stories. Where are those premises offbeat?
Either? I don't think they are. No. Mm-mm.
They aren't.
Mm-mm.
They aren't. But when you're a passionate fan, and here's the guy, as you said, helicoptering in to write about my team after writing about Clemson the week before and saying their perceptions are great now, I'm sideways about it. And I'm angry, and I'm going to let him know. And you know what? And I'm cool with that. That's their right. And again, we keep going back to our buddy Ken Berger. He said he doesn't care if he makes people angry. He said he does not care if he makes people happy. His goal is to elicit an emotion. And obviously, I touched on something. Because and that's kind of our goal with sports, to not only inform, but to touch an emotion. Because sports, more than anything else, Larry, is about emotions. People, otherwise, why do we watch? Why do we care? Unless we have so much emotionally invested in said team or sport. And again, I'm chasing rabbits here. You've got me fired up, and I shouldn't have had that second cup of coffee.
Back in if you have to go pee, let me know. That's my problem with coffee, is too many trips to the bathroom. So back in the dark ages, not pre-internet.
10 years ago?
I'll say 15, 16, 17 years ago, a newspaper sports writer, there were no metrics at all.
Yeah.
And so it's basically, like your sports editor says, all right, you go to this game, you go cover the game, and the only really metrics you have to go on is your sports editor saying either good job or why didn't you have this? Whereas now metrics are a huge part of what you do. I'm assuming, or in fact I know that. And so how, as an old school guy, how can you sort of give people an idea of what that balance is like, where traditionally a columnist would say, well, I'm writing about what I want to write about, period, and they're going to like it or not. Whereas now, and maybe it applies more to the general reporters, beat writers, headlines and all that of what gets the most clicks. I just didn't know how much that affected or how much that's a part of your world as the sports columnist.
It's huge. It's huge. I check metrics every morning. We have an app we go through called Marfield where we can see what traffic looks like. And what you have to be, I mean, you should write what's relevant anyhow, and what you think people want to learn about or want to hear about. And that's one way. Like Larry, I wrote what I thought would be a throwaway column for Sunday. What I was writing about fell through. So I came up with something else, and I have this. When I don't have any ideas, Larry, I go back to this thing called shaking the magic 8-ball, and I ask myself 3 questions, and I write about it. And I wrote a column called "Shaking the Magic 8-Ball" regarding playoff possibilities. Knocked it out in an hour, and my day was done. Ken would have been proud. Already done. So I did it, and Larry, it was the 4th most read in the entire site.
Wow.
Because people were interested in college football playoff. And I'm not talking about sports. I'm talking about all departments. People were interested in the college football playoff. The metrics, the metrics are off the charts. But normally we have to go through and you write 2 headlines. Because we do have to write our headlines now, which is different. But the desk people will change it. But you write a headline for print, and then you write one for the web. And you got to think about the way you word it and different phrasing and how many characters and all that. And then you create your URLs and try to use, words that might get traffic, summaries and things like that. That's all new SEO stuff. But really just trying to connect with a topic that you think is hot at the moment. If you can catch that in a bottle, you have what I got the other day, the 4th most read thing on the entire Post and Courier site on a Sunday. That blew my mind.
And so are you trying to get subscription signups or clicks from the non-subscriber who have access to a certain amount of free articles? Is it a mix of both? Do you really know?
All that. And yeah, and they also they can tell if somebody said, "Oh, they read this article and they decided to subscribe." Conversions.
Uh-huh.
And that's a big metric. And we get a report newsroom wide every Monday of how many people were converted, how many new users, how many original users, how traffic measured to the previous year. And I'm kind of a geek for that stuff anyhow, like stats, any kind of trends, I think it's interesting. But that's not something we had to worry about in 2004 when your boss says, okay, you're going up to Delaware to cover a basketball game. And the only way you measured if you did a good job or not was, if you got how many angry emails you got or good emails you got. It's not like they had a kid with a sandwich board on the corner. I'm off to press, extra, and they sold more papers,
Upstate foodies, want to take a moment to talk to you about our favorite taco spot, Willie Taco. 5 locations across the upstate. This award-winning team has been serving up fresh taco fusion for a solid decade now. The chefs at Willie Taco utilize the freshest, most creative, and sometimes unexpected ingredients in their kitchens. Come see why Southern Living, Garden and Gun, and Food and Wine Magazine are raving about Willie Taco and their signature offerings, such as their Southern Tide, Crispy Avocado, Nashville Hot Chicken Tacos, literally flavors you will not find anywhere else, folks. And don't forget about the cocktails. Super fresh margaritas, ice cold cerveza, and over 80 tequilas served up daily from behind the bar. So don't wait, folks. Your Willie Taco Familia is ready to serve you up their twist on funky, fresh fusion. It's the Willie way. Want to share a quick word about Founders Federal Credit Union? If you've been to a sporting event in Clemson, you've probably heard about Founders already. They are the official credit union partner of the Clemson Tigers. In addition to that, all Clemson faculty, staff, and students are eligible for membership as well as ITTE members. Its office is located beside the Walmart Neighborhood Market on Old Greenville Highway in Clemson. For more information, go to foundersfcu.com. Another loyal supporter of the Dubcast is Blackacre Law Firm in Greenville, a subsidiary of Parham Smith and Archenhold. Blackacre helps South Carolina residents achieve their dreams of home ownership by providing experienced professional representation for real estate closings. Attention to detail is crucial in real estate law. Blackacre is committed to making sure nothing gets by them preparing residential or commercial closings. Blackacre also offers estate planning services for their clients in the Greenville area. Find out more about Blackacre at 864-326-3507. So you wrote something, speaking of the playoff, I think it was last week or maybe the week before.
Oh, you're reading.
Oh, absolutely. I'm a fan of your work.
Wow.
Yeah.
You and my mom, that makes two.
But it resonated with me because I think I gathered where you were coming from, and it was basically, and I think it's where I have come from as well, and maybe where a bunch of others have come from. It's like in the run up to the 12-team playoff era, there's been so much other stuff going on. Monumental change, once in a century changes all happening at once, several things. And the transfer portal and NIL, it's created this just general feeling of, good gosh, what a freaking mess. How are they going to get through this? And it's, this is not sustainable, and it might be even ruining the game. But I think your sort of revelation was, hey, this is freaking fun. Like, I don't know if you were saying I was wrong, but I think it was like a refined sort of upon further review kind of take. Like, hey, you can criticize a lot of stuff about this game, but this, and in fact, I was dragged into the 12-team playoff kicking and screaming, honestly, because I thought 4 did its job. But I find myself totally captivated thus far, and probably more so than I was under the previous moments that were captivating. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. And I wanted it to be 6. Mm-hmm. 6 was my number. Same format, but 6. But, man, look, we don't like change. And we keep talking about our age, Larry, and being dinosaurs in our industry and all that. What's going on in college athletics, specifically college football right now, is really like what we've seen in journalism. We don't want this. We're good with that. But then when we get to it, we're like, yeah, this is pretty cool. This is great. I love the 12-team playoff right now. I am loving it. And it's only going to be 12 for a couple of years. It's going to be 16 or 14 here in 2 years. I guarantee it. Because there have been some flaws exposed that they're going to have to refine.
Oh, and because of money.
well, because of money. But, they can't marginalize the conference championship games. They're just too much involved. And I know winning the conference championship gives you an automatic ticket, but what if you're already undefeated and you're going to get an automatic ticket? Are we going to start seeing players sat in the conference championship game so that they're rested for the playoff? Or are we going to see teams better off not going to the conference championship game because they know they're going to get in one way or the other? They might as well have that be their bye week and so forth. But I'm cool with it, man. And it goes back to my passion argument. People are going to watch. People are going to spend their money. And it's what it's all about, Larry. And for so long, and I know I'm rambling, but this is actually something I have a very strong stance about. For so long, these conferences were trying to own media markets. They wanted to be in LA. They wanted to be in Chicago. The ACC footprint. We heard that for years. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. What it's about is getting a passionate fan base engaged to the point that they want to pay you money. It's kind of like your business, Larry. You are blessed with your business. Your clientele is one of the most passionate fan bases on the planet. And they keep your business going because they are willing to pay you money for the product you give them, because that product keeps them informed about everything involved with something that is dear to their hearts. And that's what it's all about, man. And as long as there are college athletics, there's going to be people willing to do that. I think it's awesome, man. I bring on 16-team playoff. I'm down for it.
The fact that Clemson, which in the past, if it had the 2 losses that it has at this point, it'd be done, as far as 4-team playoff consideration. South Carolina, of course, would be. The game would be big because both teams are in the, top 15-ish for one of the few times in the history of the rivalry, and Clemson fans probably are more terrified of losing. There's more angst about losing to South Carolina than there is about missing out on the playoff. I'll tell you that. And so anyway, it would be big regardless, but just in terms of the 12-team playoff expanding sort of the volume of teams that have skin in the game has changed everything, I think. What do you make of this game? And what I just can't get over is how quickly South Carolina has been transformed from last year when these two teams met, it was, oh gosh, Clemson's just physically superior to South Carolina, and that's why Clemson's going to win, even though Clemson wasn't a great team. And now it's kind of, I don't want to say been totally flipped because that's not fair to Clemson, but South Carolina almost overnight became a big physically imposing team. What do you make of that transformation?
I don't know. I mean, I was at the Kentucky game, and I came out of there. That was week 2.
Mm-hmm.
And my column coming out of that week was that this is South Carolina's identity. They figured out who they are. They're going to be a grinded out, bloody their knuckles type of team. And then they weren't for a couple of weeks. They were, doing the usual South Carolina roller coaster stuff. But somewhere along the line, kind of to your point, they just swelled up, and that's who they are now. And I don't know if they were always that, Larry, and they just weren't being utilized correctly, maybe. I mean, Dow Loggins, the offensive coordinator, let's just call a spade, man. I mean, he was not a good offensive coordinator in the NFL. He was not. He was regularly one of the worst, actually. And you can Google that. He lost player polls for being the worst play caller. He didn't have coordinator experience in college. He was a tight ends coach, like Shane Beamer. I mean, that was his background, and now he's the offensive coordinator at South Carolina. Doesn't quite know what to do last year with Spencer Rattler, kind of all over the place. They had some defections through the portal. And even this year at the beginning of the season, what do you do with Sellers? What do you do with Lenore Sellers? And then Lenore Sellers figuring out what to do. And it's like somewhere before the Alabama game, and I think I wrote about it, on the plane to Tuscaloosa, the light bulb went off for Dow Loggins, for Lenore Sellers, and for Shane Beamer about what they could do and what they're capable of. And they've been a different team ever since. They're physical. They play with confidence. And it gives me the Arkansas vibes from a couple of years ago when they had KJ Jefferson and Rocket Sanders. It's that whole deal. And the way their offensive line is playing, I mean, there was a point earlier in the year, might have been LSU game. I mean, I'm sitting there thinking, is my column to fire the staff? I wrote that Beamer would have to make some serious changes, thinking Loggins has got to go, but I was thinking offensive line coach. I mean, Sean Elliott's on the staff. He's not coaching offensive line. How does that work? But here we are. I mean, what they've put together is pretty darn impressive, man.
Two things, just from the outside looking in. I think a lot of it comes back to you got a really young quarterback who's ridiculously gifted, who was early in his first season as a starter. We saw that with Cade Klubnik last year. I mean, it's a rarity to have a first-year starter quarterback, no matter how talented, who just sort of breezes through, and has nothing but success. And I think even in that LSU game, you could see Sellers, his explosiveness as a runner was just on another level. And then number two, I 100% agree with you. And that's the wisdom about the Arkansas connection. And that highlights the wisdom, I guess, that Beamer had in bringing Loggins to Columbia, because it looks the same to me as the KJ Jefferson Sanders deal. When you have those two working in tandem with the option game and then the downfield passing game off of that, it can be a force. And then you combine that with their defensive line. I mean, it's been in South Carolina's history, they haven't had that combination, great quarterback, very talented quarterback, and a dominant defensive line in a long time. And to me, at least, that goes a long way toward explaining why they look so confident. You don't go to Kentucky. I know that Kentucky's not very good, and blow their doors off. You don't go to Alabama and do what they did there, go to Vanderbilt, do what they did there, Oklahoma, if you don't have a confident team. And to me, at least, again, outside looking in, that has to all stem from having a great defensive line and then a really special quarterback.
Does that formula sound familiar to a certain degree?
Absolutely. Deshaun Watson and Clemson's defensive line for sure. I think I don't think Sellers is as refined of a player at the same stage as Deshaun was. I mean, Deshaun was kind of ready-made, and that goes far against the grain. But I'll say this: Deshaun wasn't the runner that Sellers is. So,
you mentioned LSU, and that was with all the penalties and everything, and some of that's on the offensive line. I mean, they had some pre-snap penalties. I don't blame that on the refs, but people forget that Sellers sprained his ankle that game.
Yep, and I thought it might be serious, right?
Yeah, they did, and I think if he doesn't get injured, and I've spoken to some other people about this, I mean, they probably win that football game.
Yeah,
honestly, I truly believe that. I mean, he's that kind of talent, and to watch him develop, and I know we're all prisoners of the moment. He could fall apart, and he could throw 5 picks on Saturday, and we go, well, that's the freshman in him, and all that. But I think he's the real deal. I think he's the real deal as long as he keeps playing within himself, which he has actually done more and more lately. He looks great. Let me ask you, Larry. You're an expert. If you're Cliff Godwin, or who's the defense? I've been slipping my mind right
Wes
now.
Goodwin.
Wes Goodwin. Cliff Godwin's a baseball coach. How do you contain Lenore Sellers? I mean, who is he comparable to that they've seen in ACC play, and they were able to put together a game plan to keep him in?
Oh Lord, I'm not going to say it's an impossibility, but the Stanford's quarterback ran wild on him in the first half.
Yeah.
I mean, they did limit him as a passer. Okay. So it's kind of like, they I guess this might be too simplistic, but they defended the pass. They chose that maybe, and that thus they gave up a lot on the ground, but that would be the closest comparison. Holstein at Pitt, who was a dual threat, he didn't play against them. Drones from Virginia Tech did play, but was injured and was not nearly his full self. And so that's the big question. But I think it goes both ways, because both Sellers and Klubnik have made sort of a living, or made their most sort of feared element is improvisational plays outside the pocket. That just makes a defensive coordinator pull his hair out, because you can be, even when you're right, they can make you wrong, right? Like you do everything right, and containing, man, that's just so much easier said than done. Because those off-schedule plays, I was watching the Missouri game, South Carolina-Missouri game, and they had a stat that blew my mind. Sellers had, at that point, I think going into the Missouri game, 13 plays of 20 yards or more went outside the pocket, and it led the nation, which is just staggering. So not only, and I'm talking passes, so and that doesn't even account for his running ability and the difficulty of getting him on the ground. So I think the biggest thing, Clemson's defensive line is really good. I think if you make them one-dimensional between the tackles, you win those battles on the line of scrimmage, and then you scheme up the sort of theoretical containment. I think that's one thing, but what he has shown is it's so damn hard to get him on the ground.
Yeah, and here's something else to keep your eye on, and his stats aren't going to rock your world, but Nick Harbor, the world-class speed, you have to be mindful of him, and he's been getting more targets, and he's caught a couple more balls lately than he was earlier in the year, but just having that speed threat out there stretches things so much. And then, of course, having Rocket Sanders healthy, you put all that into a pot of gumbo, man, and it makes things really spicy for the defense. That's a good way to put it, because I was watching, we were at Vanderbilt, and in years past, you would shake your head and say, well, that's Vandy being Vandy. This Vandy team's pretty good.
Yeah.
But you would just see how the defense would stretch like a slinky wherever Nick Harbor was going, and it created these huge gaps for everybody else. And that's why Simon, the tight end, he had such a good game. I think it was A&M game, and then he had another solid one at Vandy. That's why he's been so productive lately. And Sellers, able to be mobile, move around in the pocket, move outside the pocket, and find these guys open. That's where they're getting these chunk plays.
And Harbor against Missouri, they put him in the slot a lot, which matches him up against. I mean, that's a tough matchup either way. If you go big and you have a linebacker on him, you're dead. And even if you go small with a safety, that's still and you're right. He just looks faster to me when I see. He's always been fast, but as you know, there's track fast and there's football fast, and you only get football fast when you're comfortable and you know what you're doing. Simon is interesting because he has an ankle injury and was in a walking boot, I think, during the game this past weekend against Wofford. If Simon is not on the field, that's a huge absence, I think. Yeah,
especially with the way he's kind of been the yin to the yang of the running game over the past couple of weeks. But they sat him by design. I mean, I think he could have played if they wanted, and they wanted him to be entirely healthy. So that's what we're told. That's how we're going to approach it from our angle. But I don't know, man. Yeah, I'm excited. I haven't been excited for a Clemson South Carolina game in maybe forever. I'll be honest with you.
What do you make of Clemson this year? Like, if you were to, like, just your big picture view of them, like I don't want to say a grade, but it's been sort of, I don't know, up and down. It's hard to really get a read on them, in part because I don't think we've seen them at their total best yet.
I came out of Georgia thinking they had a lot of work to do, but the entire season was still in front of them, and that's been proven correctly. I can't really explain what happened against Louisville. I mean, Louisville's a pretty good team. My take when I think of Clemson this year, though, Larry, is that it's a pivotal year for Dabo because it's getting to the point now where he's got to validate his way of doing things, because the tide has swung, the momentum has swung towards the way everybody else is doing it now so much with the portal and all this stuff that he's hit a point where he has to validate his passion about being a developmental program. He has to validate that he keeps saying Clemson is the elite of the elite, because the gaps between the elite of the elite are tighter now than they've been maybe ever. Maybe ever, I'll say that. Because, Larry, let's just go back to the old days of the 14 playoff. And you mentioned it earlier, how many teams now are in position for this 12-team playoff. We had the same teams every year except for usually 2. Usually 8 teams a year we thought would be in the playoff. 2 surprise teams, 6 regulars. But beyond that, you had the same 2 to 3 that would be in the championship. Who can actually win it? And the gap between 3 and 4 was huge. That gap is tightening now. People are catching up to Clemson. They've caught up to Alabama. Yeah. We see that. And I think for Dabo to keep doing things his way and to still insist that Clemson is an elite program, and I'm not saying it's not, but for him to keep insisting that, I think he has to prove it this year on the field. And that means getting into the playoff. I know they need help, but they're still alive for it. And that means getting in the playoff, and not only getting in the playoff, I think they have to win a game. They have to win at least one game. That's just my personal take on it. I think there's a lot on the line for this season.
Should be fun. Scott, looking forward to High Noon on Saturday. I am equally excited about this one. Should be a heck of a lot of fun.
I like breakfast at Memorial Stadium. I like the biscuits there a lot. The lady usually gets me to get as many as I want to eat in the media center. I'm going to go low carb, no carb, maybe somewhere around February. So it's all good. I'm excited, man.
Really appreciate you giving us your time, and had a lot of fun, man. Appreciate it.
Hey, I appreciate you, and I really, really enjoy your product a lot, man.
Who says dinosaurs can't learn new tricks? And I include myself in that category of dinosaur as well. What a story of hustle and reinvention over Scott's life. Credit to him for sure. Glad that he is still in this business and in this state as a sports columnist, or I guess as the newspaper sports columnist. Appreciate the support of our sponsors, as always, for helping to make this happen. And thanks to every one of you. We got another one coming this week. Planning on talking to former longtime college football coach Ellis Johnson. He is always a great conversation, and that will be especially true this week as he has scouted both of these teams pretty extensively, Clemson and South Carolina. So certainly stay tuned for that, and happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Cheers.